Hello future coders. This video is intended for anyone who's never programmed before and is interested in trying their hand at a new skill. I'm going to try my best to simplify concepts and break down barriers that may have held you back in the past from approaching this field, and hopefully you'll be inspired to write some code of your own. In essence, programming is about writing instructions that a computer can understand. Now, you may think that sounds simple enough, but in reality, the way you write these instructions is the important part. For example, let's imagine I'm a computer. We've got this ball right here, and let's say you've given me the instruction to bounce the ball. Okay, let's run the program. Now, this seems kind of silly, but what happened here? The instructions seemed clear enough to us, but to a computer, it has no idea what it means to actually bounce a ball. This is a fundamental concept in programming. You need to be explicit. So, if we were to revise our instructions, we'd write something like, move hand towards the ball, grab the ball, lift the ball up 30 centimeters, and let go. Okay, much better. Now, I want you guys to keep this concept in mind as we write our first program. Let's get started. We're going to be using standard web programming languages composed of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. There are many languages to choose from, but I feel like this is a nice beginner-friendly language which also has a nice visual component to it, so you can see the results of your code immediately. So the tools you're going to need are a web browser, preferably Google Chrome. It has some nice developer-friendly tools that you can use, and Visual Studio Code, which you can just Google right here and download the one that's for your specific device. At the end of the day, code is just text, but having a code editor like Visual Studio Code really helps simplify the coding process. Once you've got your browser and Visual Studio Code downloaded and installed, you're going to want to open up Visual Studio Code. You can ignore these for now if they pop up. So you're going to go to File, New File, index.html. I'm going to press Enter. And don't worry about these files and their file names for now. I'll explain them later on in the tutorial. Just follow along for now. So you're going to create a new folder here. New folder, and we're going to say, I don't know, practice, something like that. Create file. You're going to do the same thing again. Now you're going to call it script.js. You're going to click create file again. Last one, new file. We're going to call it styles.css. Okay. Great there. Okay. Now you're going to close these guys and then open up your project. So you're going to go to File, Open Folder, and yeah, there it is, the practice folder, and you're going to select that. And now you have, yes, I trust the authors. And now you have your practice project opened up here. So you got your three files, index.html, script.js, and styles.css. So I wanted to go over these three files and how they work together to create a website, essentially. You can go to any website on the internet, and they are created using these three components in some shape or form, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or any site you can think of. So we created a file called index.html. So it is a HTML file. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, but don't worry about that. But actually the M part, markup, kind of gives you a hint as to what it is. It essentially is the structure of your website. So you can create little sections. You can define sections, for example, or like dividers, like something like this. And these define the structure of your website. So you have, like, here is your website. You can define a box. You can define another box in there, some text here. This will define that layout. So now you have JS, which stands for JavaScript. So the important part here is the script. This actually does basically all. This is where the meat of the programming happens. So you can think of this as like HTML being the nouns. JavaScript is the verb. The verbs are the verbs. This defines the action and makes the website dynamic. So then we can hook that up into here and make things happen. For example, we can make this box move. And last but not least, you have CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Now, the most important thing you got to worry about is style. Okay, so this defines the look of your website. So like the look, the colors, and like the design. Essentially, it'll prettify your website. And you can do things like animations in here as well. So these components work together to create a website, or also referred to as a web app. All right, now that we know the basics, let's get into coding. As a coder, Google is going to be your best friend, and there's some really great resources out there that you can use. For example, HTML and a lot of coding in general, there's code that every program needs called boilerplate code. Okay, and so you don't want to have to write this code all the time yourself every time. So these are things you can Google. So for example, I can search HTML, and W3 Schools is a really great resource for web development. Go here and you can see they have an example of an HTML page, and you can try it yourself, but we can just copy this code here and paste it here. So we have this document type as HTML, and again, so remember, these are defining the structure of the page. So we're saying it's an HTML page, which has a header. So we're gonna indent that like that. It's always good to indent your code so you can see the hierarchy much better. So that's the head starts here, the head ends here. So this slash means it's the end of this section. So now this is the beginning of the body. So this is where your main part of your code goes. So I'm gonna go like that, like that. Okay, fix the space a little bit. So now we got some nice looking code here for our HTML file. So again, we're starting in HTML document type and enclosing everything in the HTML tag. We have a header. I'll show you what this shows, where this goes later, but this is really what you got to worry about. So body. So here we're saying this is a heading, this is a paragraph, and again, so these little tags are contextual. So this means paragraph, this means header 1. You don't have to worry about it too much. We can just write this is a paragraph, there you go, in the body. Very simple. And then we can open this and see how it is. So remember to save. You're going to go to File, Save, or I like to do Control S on Windows and Command S on Mac. So now we are going to split the view here. I really like programming like this. It makes life a lot easier. So we're going to open up our practice folder, and we have the index.html here. You can see the little Chrome icon. It's going to open with Chrome by default. If that's not the case, you can go to right click on it, open with, and find the application you need. So I'm just going to double click on this, and there it is. That's our website. This is a paragraph, and that's basic HTML. It's defining just the structure and the content of the site. So our first goal for today is we're going to create a box and make it move across the screen. All right, so let's see how that works. So instead of text here inside the body, we want to create a box. So what I like to do is use this section tag. We're creating a new section here. And so we're going to put whatever we want inside the section in between these two tags. So we're going to create a div. So div is essentially the most generic piece of HTML you can have. So this can be a box, it can be an image, it can be anything you want. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to, I guess, type this is a box. And So I saved here, and so every time we make a change, we have to come here and refresh. You can see this is a box. Obviously, it's not a box, and a box shouldn't have text, right? So, okay, there you go. So there's a handy tool in Chrome, especially in Chrome. I know other browsers have it too, but you can right-click on your HTML and click Inspect, and it would let you debug and see your code in real time. So here we can see exactly what we wrote here. We have a section and we have a div. You can see it actually has nothing associated with it. There's no width or height or color or anything. So we have to make it into the box we want. Again, remember, being explicit, we have to tell it exactly what we want. To actually make the box look like a box, that's where CSS comes in. We have the styles.css file, and so we need to hook that up into index.html. And the way we do that is we go here in the header. This is just like a standard thing you got to do, again, boilerplate stuff. We're going to create something called a link. The rel is, what does rel stand for? Names relationship of the linked document to the current document. Okay, rel is relationship apparently. I actually didn't know that. So it's going to be a style sheet. We're going to say this linked file is a style sheet, and its reference is styles.css. So again, we're referencing this file we just created here. Okay, and then we're gonna close the tag. Okay, and I'm gonna save, refresh. Still nothing happened, but now at least these two files are linked up. So the way we actually, so I want to directly connect to this div here and update its style. So I can do that by giving it an ID. So I can say ID equals box, and then I can come here in the CSS and select that ID using a hashtag. So I'm going to do hashtag box like that. And a lot of this stuff is syntax you'll get familiar with as you code more. But for now, you can just follow along. So box, and we can give it a width. Let's give it a width of 200 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. And we're going to say background color is green. Okay, I'm going to save, refresh, and there it is. You have your first box. Great. So now we've got the structure and the style, and now the last piece of the puzzle is actually making this box move, and that's where the script comes along. So again, just like the styles, we have to include the script in the HTML. So the way we do that is actually here. You place it at the very bottom of the body, and you type in script source equals script.js. You're gonna close that off and close that off, and so that's the syntax for that. Again, if we refresh, nothing happens, but you can see it's being referenced there. Now that we got our script hooked up, we're gonna want to test to see if it actually works. So we can do something called console.log, and you can type hello world. You know, that's typically when you write your first program, you type hello world, hello programming world. So I'm going to save this, refresh, and so where you actually find these logs is in the console section here in Chrome. And there you go, hello world. So our website is running and it's displaying our code. So now you want to connect to this box somehow from your code, and JavaScript has some very handy tools and functions you can use to help you do that. We're going to type in document.getElement by ID. Remember, we set an ID here for the box, and just like how we selected by ID here in CSS, we can select by ID in JavaScript. And then so we can type in box, and then we can console log this to see if it can find the box. Goes console.log and get the box, and we're going to refresh, and there you go. That's our div. So we've successfully communicated with the HTML in our code. So that's the first step. Let's say we want to animate this box and make it move. So what we need to do is, actually here, let me copy this. We want to add something to the box that tells it, hey, I want you to start animating. And the way you do that is with classes. So the same way we added an ID to the box, we could have also added something called a class. So test class. Okay, so ID means it's specific only to this piece of element. So this is a unique identifier. Only one box can exist with the ID box. So if we were to create another box here, we'd have to call it box2. But the class can be the same. So you can have multiple boxes that share the same class, and they, for example, you want all your boxes to be green, so then you can do that with the class here, or if you want them all to have the same animation. So we can actually add this class through code. So we have our box here, and we can say dot class list, and we're going to do dot add, and we're going to type in animate box. Okay, that's it. So now if I save, I refresh, we can see our box actually has that class now. Now in our CSS, remember I said CSS is where we actually can do the animation. So we can create just like what we did for the ID, we can create one for the class, but this time classes use dot instead of the hashtag. So animate box, and then we can do an animation here. So we can type animation dash name. We're gonna call it we can call it slide box. We can say animation duration for 1 second. We have a name, which the animation we're gonna create in a second, and a duration. So now this is how you create animations in CSS. So you do at keyframes, and we're going to type the name, slide box, and we're going to say at 0%, we're going to say the transform translate on the x-axis, so left and right, the horizontal, we're going to be at 0 pixels. Then at the end of our animation, which is at 100%, we want the transform translate to be 100 pixels. Okay, we're going to save, refresh. There you go, it moved. But so as you can see here, it went back because the animation finished. So we can type something called animation fill mode and type forwards and make it stay when the animation is finished. I know this is probably a bit overwhelming seeing all these different bits of code and syntax, but trust me, if you keep studying it and keep practicing, all this will become second nature. But for now, just try to follow along, try to get stuff working. I just think getting your feet wet and getting right into it is the best way to learn. So this is awesome. We got our first animation. That's really cool. Like for your first program, I think that's pretty impressive. I want to show you the end goal here for this video, and so this is what it's going to look like. I've programmed it beforehand. See, we have our box there moving, which we've already done here. The color's a little different. We can update that. Then we're going to have a little counter, which is going to go up every time we click this button. So let's see how it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little animation there. You can go as far as you like. Okay, so we're going to try to get to this point. So that's our goal. That's our next goal. So let's first work on the counter actually, and then we'll get to the styling of it later on. We're going to create this counter section here. So the way we do that is just like our box, we go back into our HTML and we can create another section there. So and then we have here, you can see we have a text field and then we have a button. So we need two elements. So again, we can use our generic divider. We have two elements, so we can do 1, 2. So the first one, I'll say ID equals counter. Okay. You can start with 0. So this is the text inside. And then we have one called ID equals button. And we can say increment. If we refresh our page, this is what it looks like. Okay, let's go style these guys a little bit. So I'm gonna select the counter and we're gonna say font weight bold, and then we're gonna do font size. Let's do 42 pixels, and then we're gonna give it a color of, what's the one that was in the demo? Just that yellowish color there. Save. There you go. So now for the button, we're gonna give it a background color, and it's gonna be FFDFBA. So that again, you can also you can just type in a color if you want. Like we can just make it yellow. That's fine too. But I think this looks a little nicer. And we're gonna refresh, and so that's what it looks like there. We're gonna give it a width to the button. So we're gonna say width is 100 pixels. Now if we refresh, we can see it. So we want to center the text. We can type in text align center. You know, pretty self-explanatory. I think these are pretty descriptive syntax. So there you go. Text is aligned. Now we want to give more space around the text. So we can say padding. Let's say 5 pixels. There you go. Got some more space there. We want to round out the edges here, so we can type in border radius, let's say 4 pixels. There you go. Now it's starting to look like a button. And I think the most important thing for it to look like a button is a box shadow. So it looks more clickable. So we can give it a box shadow. Say 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 5 pixels, and just black. So refresh again. So you can see these values here. You don't have to know too much what they do, just follow along for now. But here, if I make these 5, so that moves it more. So I can make this 10 and 5. So as you can see, it goes 10 to the right. If I do -10, it goes 10 to the left. And this is for top and down. So I can bring these back to 1, make it look a little nicer. Yeah, there you go. Kind of looks like a button there. And you see every time I go over the button, it selects the text. So we want to avoid that as well. We can do user select none. And refresh. And there you go. Now it's really feeling like a button. Now we can add something called cursor pointer. And then so now if you go over the button, it gives that little hand icon. Nice. Now if we, like the demo here, it has you can hover over it, and if you click it, it goes like that. It goes a little darker. We can set those properties as well. So we can do button, and then so you can do :hover, and you can reduce the you can set the brightness to, for example, 110%. So save, we hover over it, it goes a little brighter. So now the last bit of detail here is when we actually click it, So as you imagine, you have another state here. So you have hover and then you have active. So active means when you click it. We can make the brightness lower here. So we're going to do this, and we're going to say 90%, and then we're going to say box shadow none. Okay. So here, click. There you go. I think that's pretty good. We can tweak it a little bit, of course, make it a little nicer. So what we can do actually is also transform translate y 1 pixel, and then so it moves a little bit down. There you go. Pretty nice button. So now we want to actually make the button do something. So similar to our box, we can do document.get element by ID, and we're gonna say button. And then so we need to tell it, hey, I want to do something when I click this button. And the way you do that is you add an event listener. Okay, so this listens for events, as it says, and the event we want to listen to is click. Okay, and we want to say, when I click this button, I want to run something, we'll call it increment counter. Now here we're going to go to some basic programming concepts here. So what increment counter is something we can define up here. So we can say const increment counter is actually a function. So a function is code you can encapsulate in a chunk of its own. Okay, so we can define code here and then refer to it somewhere else. So we don't have to write all the code all in one place here. We can simplify our code. So in the meantime, we can simply do a console.log and type in button pressed to see if everything is hooked up properly. So increment counter, and it's a function, and save, refresh. There you go. It's all hooked up. Now we're kind of freestyling this, so we're gonna introduce concepts as we go. So now we want to keep track of a counter and make this go up every time. So what we need here is something called a variable, and so we've actually used a variable here without really knowing it. But so you can do let counter equals 0. You know what? Let's call this let as well, just to avoid confusion. But pretty much const is a variable that doesn't change. Let is a variable that can change. So we'll just use let for simplicity. So we can create a variable called counter and assign it to 0. So variable is essentially, it stores data which we can use throughout our program. So we're going to say right now it's equal to 0, okay? But when I click the button, I want to add 1 to it. So I can say equals counter, it equals itself plus 1. Another shorthand for this is plus equals 1. Okay, so these two are equivalent here. So I think this is more verbose, easy to understand. So here we can actually do comma and type and add the counter here. So if we refresh and press the button, we can see the counter goes up by 1 every time. And during the duration that the program is running, this variable will be part of the program's data. Okay, so if I refresh, you can see everything is reset here, and it starts again. But during the lifetime of the program that this is running, these variables data will be saved. So you've learned two very important concepts in programming with this very simple code. One being variables, which store data, and the other one being functions, which actually encapsulate code in like a little unit. So I can close that, or For example, I could create another function called let crazy super money making algorithm. Okay, I can create a function, and I don't have to know how that crazy algorithm works, blah blah blah, but I know it's encapsulated in this crazy thing, and I can use it throughout the program. So it helps us write better code, cleaner code, and helps us read code a lot easier. So variables and functions are your best friend. So now let's actually get the counter to update on the HTML. And the way we do that is simply we can change the content of the HTML to this value of our variable here. And so we can do, again, I think you should be familiar with this now, document.getElementById, and we'll call it counter, and we can do .inner HTML equals the value of this counter. Okay, so we're going to save, refresh. So I click increment, goes up to 1. It's very hard to see. Let me make the color black for now. So increment, 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 there you go. So it updates the variable and sets the variable to the HTML. Pretty cool. Code runs one line at a time. It seems kind of strange here because we have this code up here that's running above when you actually click. So you have the click here, but then it runs the code above it, which is, kind of not what I said before, where I said code runs one line at a time. But it is actually doing that if you think about it, because here we are defining a variable. So we are defining it, and we're not actually running it. So we're saying this is what increment counter is, and then here we are calling it here and executing here. So the code here doesn't actually run right away. All it does is create its data, and then so we actually run it here. So it is still going one line after another. It's going to go this line, line 8, line 9. When you run your program, line 8, line 9. Go here, blah blah blah, and all the way here, and then it's going to run this. And so this is stored in memory, and so it knows how to run this code already. So now really the final things we have to do are just the styling here and this little increasing animation. So let's start with the background here. So here we can define we can call the section. We want all the sections. So you see sections don't have a class or an ID. So you can just refer to them just by their name. So section, and then you want to say width, let's say 500 pixels. Oh, sorry, 500 pixels. Height 200 pixels. And background color, we're gonna do this light blue, BAE1FF. Okay, we're gonna save that, refresh, and there you go. So now if I remember this inspector here, you can go to the elements and you can see each section has that blue background. So we have two sections here, each one has the blue background. And it looks pretty nice. Let's update the color of the box. So instead of green, we want to make it this color, FFDFBA. Okay, and we're going to make it 100 pixels and 100 pixels, and we're going to save, and let's see, there you go. Looking good, getting there. And the next step is to center these counter elements here. Now the way we do that is for the counter, we can simply do text aligned center. There you go. It centered all the text in there. You can see. So now for the button, because we don't want to just center the text, we want to center the entire div itself. We want to give it a margin. So I want to do margin want the top to be 0, top and bottom. We want the left and right margin to be automatic. So I'll show you what this does here. If we look at it, so that orange part there you see highlighted is the margin. We say automatically assign the left and right margin, which makes it centered. So in web programming, actually centering things is like it is one of the biggest pains and problems people have to deal with. So I know it doesn't sound intuitive, margin 0 auto, but that's just how you do it. So this one is text align. You want to center the text in this. This you want to center the div itself. And so you put equal amounts of margin on each side. So great, we're looking close. Now to color the counter again, remember we turned it to black. So hashtag FFFF, these are just color codes. You can find these codes online. And there you go. Okay, is it close? Very close. So one final thing now is the animation. Similar to how we did the box, we're going to come here and we're going to call it animate counter. So get the ID, add a class called animate counter when you click. So if I inspect this guy and I click, oh well, okay, actually we have box here, so that's a mistake. So you want to select the counter, not the box. So refresh, I click it, and it adds the class animate counter. So again, we want to hook up that class to an animation. Here, let's do it next to the counter. We can reuse our code here. So we want to say dot animate counter here, and we're going to say, we're going to call the animation highlight counter. We're going to do at keyframes, and the identifier is going to be highlight counter, and we're going to type 0%. We want the transform. So what's happening here, as you can see, it's making the text bigger and changing its color a little bit. So it goes up and then back down, up and back down. So expanding like that is called scale. Here, moving this box was a translate, but this is called a scale transform now. So you want to do transform. So we want its beginning scale to be just its default. We want its beginning color to also be its default. Then we're going to say halfway through the animation, it's going to be a scale of a 1.5, and its color is going to be a little darker. So we're going to do FFFF00, which is a slightly darker yellow. You know what? I'm just going to type yellow. That's probably easier. And then so when the animation is complete, we want it to come back to its default, because if you can see here, it goes up and then back down. So again, back to where it started. So we're adding the class here, so let's give it a shot. Oh, okay, it worked. It kind of worked. And it stopped working. So already one thing we notice is it's quite slow. It goes up and down very slowly, and that's because we've set the animation duration to 1 second here, and we can set that to 0.2 seconds. That'll be a little bit more. There you go. Cool. Well, the problem is it only works the first time. That's because when we add the class, it already has the class now. It's done the animation. So to make it animate again, we need to remove the class, just like how the first time doesn't have a class. Remove the class and then add it again. So let's do that. Just like how we added the class, we're going to come here. We're going to say remove. Okay, we're going to save, refresh. Let's see. Okay, so works the first time. Second time, still not working, but at least we can see here that this is flashing. That means it's removing and adding the class as we said in the code. But it seems like it's adding the class way too quickly when it removes it, doesn't have a chance to actually run the animation. So there's little nuances here and there that you'll come across in programming and that we'll have to deal with. So how do we fix that? What we want to do is give it a little bit of time before adding the class. So once we remove it. So we're going to do a little set timeout here, which is a built-in JavaScript function, and we want it to say every time we want it to say that after a certain amount of seconds, so we're going to say 5 milliseconds. After 5 milliseconds, I want to run this bit of code. So I can create a function here and click enter, and I want to run this bit of code after 5 seconds. So the bit of code obviously is adding the class here, so we give it some breathing room before after removing it. So again, this is the syntax thing here, add a semicolon. I'm going to save, refresh, and there you go. Beautiful. So when I'm done programming, I always like to clean up my code. So you can get rid of these debug statements. You can go here like that. Get rid of these extra spaces. Then we have these guys. Okay, that looks pretty good. So remove the class and then add it after 5 milliseconds. And then yeah, so that looks good. I'm going to save, refresh one more time. We got our box moving and a counter going up. Beautiful. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, if you found that a bit overwhelming, I totally understand, especially if it's your first time. The idea is that after following this tutorial, you can actually say you've written your first program. Even if you don't fully understand every line of code right now, you've already begun to build the neural pathways and the muscle memory for writing code. I encourage everyone to play around with the code we've written here and see if you can do other cool things like making the box spin, making the counter go down instead of up, or changing the style to your liking. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if any part was confusing or if there are other concepts you want me to go over in future videos. Alright, take care.